Welcome back, everyone. Let's go and take a look at the iPhone 10 and see how it compares against the iPhone SE second generation in 2022. Now, both these iPhones are somewhat budget phones as of now. The iPhone 10 may be, actually, I think the iPhone SE 2 is a little bit cheaper in the used market, but if you want to pick up either one of these phones, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there. You can help support the channel at the same time. Now, side by side, you can definitely tell the iPhone 10 is a little bit of a bigger phone than the iPhone SE 2. The iPhone 10, which came out in 2017, is a 2017 flagship. It used to be a $1,000 phone. It had a 5.8-inch Super Retina OLED display on the front, and it was a pretty good panel. I mean, it was a really good panel when it first came out. I think right now it's still a pretty decent panel for the most part. I mean, it doesn't have 120 hertz, it doesn't have ProMotion. As you can see, I'm rocking iOS 16 on both of these in a beta, so there's going to be glitches all over the place. And I would definitely say this panel is still pretty good. It's definitely a much better design and a much better panel than the iPhone SE 2 with its 4.7-inch display. Now, this screen is pretty much the exact same thing that we had on the iPhone 6, and it's like a 750p or 730p, whatever it was, type of panel. It's definitely not that crazy. I still say, though, with the design of this thing, it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't really look cheap. It just looks like an older type of iPhone. So I definitely say in terms of the design, the iPhone 10 definitely wins without a doubt. In terms of thinness and thickness, I kind of think the iPhone 10 is a little bit of a thicker phone. The iPhone SE 2, which kind of stemmed from the iPhone 8's design, looks very, very good. I mean, it still looks very good from, front and the back, and it's a very thin phone as well. But the iPhone 10 clearly is the better one here, in my opinion. Now on the back, we do have glass backs on both. A dual camera setup on the iPhone 10. iPhone SE 2 had a single camera setup, wireless charging, IP certification on both. There is no MagSafe charging on both these. You have the Lightning port on the bottom too. Definitely when it comes down to it, at least in my opinion, the iPhone 10 is the better one here in terms of the design. It's definitely a much better looking phone, and I definitely would say if I had to pick up one right now, the iPhone 10 would probably be the one to go. But there's a kind of a weird thing that's been going on right now, and that's actually with these software updates and software versions. The iPhone 10, even though it looks like a newer phone and it was more expensive when it first came out, it's a 2017 phone. So the chances are this thing is probably going to be outdated probably sooner than later compared to the iPhone SE 2, which came out technically in 2020. I say technically because it has the same chipset inside as a 2019 device. So I say that to say the iPhone SE 2 is probably going to outlast the iPhone 10 in terms of software updates, which is weird because you look at this phone and you look at this one. This one does not look like it's going to beat this phone, but it kind of does. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. Now let's go into a speed comparison between both these phones. The iPhone SE 2 has that Apple A13 Bionic chip inside of it with 3 gigabytes of RAM, but the iPhone 10 has that Apple A11 Bionic chip inside of it with 3 gigabytes of RAM as well. So let's go and see which one is the faster one. Okay, there we go. All the apps are cleared out in the background, as you all can tell. So let's get into it. SE2 here, iPhone 10 here, phone calls 321, and they are both on iOS 16 as well. Okay, hopping out of this one, let's go and do App Store 321. And the iPhone 10 was actually a little bit faster there. Very, very strange. I wasn't expecting that. The SE2 I'm expecting to be the faster one because it does have a newer chipset and all that other stuff. Clock 321. Okay, I think the SE2 was faster there. Okay, let's go and get into stocks 321. And 2 different panels here, so we're just going to have to kind of let this one slide. Let's go and get into Apple TV, which I do not have here. 3, 2, 1. iPhone 10 I think glitched up a little bit right when I opened it up, but I don't think it was that crazy big of a deal. But it did load up faster on the iPhone 10 there. I don't know if that was another issue or what the heck was going on over there. Let's go and do podcast 3, 2, 1. Okay, iPhone SE2 is a faster one too. Now let's get into some of these third-party apps. Now I have a game like Genshin Impact. It's a fairly large game, but I want to test it on both 3, 2, 1. I am expecting the iPhone SE2 to be better here, but honestly, you just never know. And the iPhone SE2 was the faster one here, and the iPhone 10 a little bit slower. I have also seen back in the day, the iPhone SE2 was a pretty decent performing phone in terms of stability and in terms of gaming performance. So when it came out against Genshin Impact, the iPhone SE2 was doing a little bit of a better job as well. I do have some of these other third-party apps that I have on both. As always, we're going to go and test out Snake vs. Blocks 3, 2, 1. Almost identically the same thing on both. Let's go and do Facebook 3, 2, 1. I think the iPhone 10 was slightly, or SE2 was faster. Twitter 3, 2, 1. And the iPhone SE2 again was the faster one. Hopping out of this one, let's go and get into Netflix 3, 2, 1. Again, iPhone SE2 is the faster one. Quizlet 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's go and hop out of this one. Let's go and get into Snapchat. 3, 2, 1. And the SE2 is faster. And I think we're seeing a recurring trend here finally. Let's do Temple Run 2, 3, 2, 1. Essentially, what was going on was, for some reason, the iPhone 10 was beating the iPhone SE2, and now the iPhone SE2 is kind of beating the iPhone 10. It looks like there's a lot of flip-flopping going on, but I think when it came down to it, the iPhone SE2 was slightly the faster one almost every single time. Even with that little delay on the iPhone 10, I think the iPhone SE2 would still beat it. So that kind of takes us to the end of the speed comparison, and I do think, like I mentioned, the iPhone SE2 is probably the faster one almost every single time. I think the iPhone 10 is the one I would recommend buying in terms of design and everything, but the SE2 is the faster one when it comes down to it. So that kind of covers it up there. Now, in terms of the actual cameras on the back, the iPhone 10 actually does have the dual camera setup, where the iPhone SE2 had a single camera setup. So this was something that's very interesting. The iPhone SE2's camera is technically better because it is newer with a newer chipset, but the iPhone 10 with its dual camera setup has always been pretty good in my opinion. Now, on the back, I would definitely tell you the photos and videos you can still take on an iPhone 10 are still pretty good. Are they perfect? Not really. I mean, I've noticed that there's a lot of grain sometimes with these types of photos. Video mode is still pretty good. Portrait mode you have on both these phones as well. You do have 4K at 60 on the back. You have 1080p on the front of both these phones as well. And I don't really think one phone has an astronomically better camera here. I think the best thing with the iPhone 10 is its telephoto lens. So you have the ability of zooming in a ton into a photo, a lot more than an iPhone SE2. So that is one thing to keep in mind. But I've always found that the iPhone 10's camera was pretty good. And I actually kind of found that the iPhone SE2's camera was also pretty solid as well. I never really found that this camera to be like the worst camera of all time. I think it was just kind of weird for them to make a phone like this with this type of camera. I feel like they could have done a little bit better job even in 2020. And I think this camera visibly the lenses look better. I think the post-processing that the Apple A13 Bionic chip does is actually a little bit better than what some people expect. So I think that's pretty good. You still have portrait mode on this phone too, which is really nice. There's no cinematic mode or anything crazy on both these phones, but at least you have that type of capability. So I think when it comes down to the actual camera lens on the iPhone SE2, it's still a pretty good camera. If you're taking Snapchats and videos and stuff like that, it's going to be good. The only issue that you're probably going to have is its single lens. If it had multiple lenses, that would have been perfect. But I do understand what Apple did here. They're trying to make people want to upgrade to something like a flagship. So I think as of in 2022, when it comes down to both these devices, I kind of do think that the iPhone SE2 is somewhat of a good phone overall. I think the only issues I have with this phone are like battery life and maybe the design. But other than that, I think this phone is still pretty decent. I think it's probably the better phone overall. Like if you had to go and buy one of these and you want to keep it for the next few years, and this one is probably the better one I would recommend buying. But when I look at something like the iPhone 10, this is the phone I love. This is a phone that I would probably recommend people to buy too. It's so hard to kind of pick between these two. The iPhone 10 is a little bit more expensive in the used market compared to the iPhone SE2, but you're getting a phone that's going to be here probably for another 2 years. I would say 1 year of full OS updates, maybe another year of security updates if Apple does something weird. So I think that's kind of where we're at. I think the iPhone 10 is probably the better one if you want to keep a phone for 2 years. But if you want to keep a phone for probably 3 to 4 years, the SE2 is probably the better way to go in my opinion. It's a faster phone, but the iPhone 10 is just kind of the better phone, the design and everything I love on this device. So that kind of covers it up. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.